There was once a generation that crossed oceans to fight evil. They worked 16-hour factory shifts, rationed food, recycled metal, and planted victory gardens. They watched their friends die beside them so the world could stay free. They weren't perfect or superhuman. Most were barely adults. But when history demanded courage, they answered. This is the story of World War II and the generation known as the Greatest Generation. Before World War II began, the world was already broken. The 1930s were brutal. The Great Depression devastated economies. Millions were unemployed. Families lost homes and businesses. Out of that desperation, dangerous leaders rose to power. In Germany, Hitler promised restoration. Mussolini pushed fascism in Italy. Military expansion consumed Japan. Nations fell into darkness. Ordinary people everywhere were simply trying to survive. They had no idea history was about to call on them. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland. World War II had begun. The Nazi war machine moved with terrifying speed. Country after country collapsed. France fell, cities burned. Millions fled their homes. Across Europe, fear spread rapidly. Then came one of the darkest realities, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were murdered. Entire families disappeared. Communities vanished. The world witnessed evil on an industrial scale. While tyranny expanded overseas, many Americans hoped to stay out of the war. That changed forever on December 7, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor shocked the nation. Thousands were killed. Overnight, an entire generation stepped forward. They came from farms, factories, small towns, big cities. Many had never traveled far. Suddenly, they were preparing to fight across the entire world. More than 16 million Americans served. What made this generation extraordinary wasn't just bravery in combat, it was sacrifice. Women entered factories in massive numbers, building planes, tanks, ammunition, and ships. Families rationed gasoline, meat, sugar, and rubber. Children collected scrap metal. Citizens bought war bonds. People understood. Freedom required responsibility. The mindset was different. Duty came before comfort. Country came before self. They believed hardship was something to endure, not something to escape. The war spread across two massive fronts. In Europe, Allied forces fought Nazi Germany. In the Pacific, brutal battles raged against Imperial Japan. Conditions were horrific. Soldiers fought in frozen forests, deserts, jungles, and trenches filled with mud. Many were only 18 or 19 years old. Some lied about their age to enlist. Teenagers volunteering to fight machine guns, tanks, and artillery, believing something bigger was worth defending. The casualty numbers are almost impossible to comprehend. More than 70 million people died. Entire cities were reduced to rubble. Yet, despite unimaginable destruction, people kept going. Not because they were fearless, but because courage is continuing despite fear. June 6, 1944, also known as D-Day, one of the most important military operations. Thousands of Allied troops landed on heavily defended beaches in Nazi-occupied France. The men knew many would die before reaching shore, and many did. Machine gun fire tore through the surf. Explosions filled the beaches, chaos everywhere. But they kept moving forward, step by step, yard by yard. Because if they failed, freedom in Europe might disappear. Think about the mindset required for that moment. No smartphones, no social media, no guarantees, just duty, just courage, just commitment to something greater than themselves. Back home, the sacrifices continued. Mothers waited anxiously for letters. Fathers worked endless shifts. Families lived with uncertainty every single day. Then came the telegrams, the knock at the door. News that a son or husband would never return. Nearly every family was touched by loss. Yet despite the pain, people stayed resilient. Communities stayed united. There was a shared understanding that freedom carried a cost. They disagreed politically, but when the world was in danger, they stood together. In 1945, Allied forces finally defeated Nazi Germany. Soon after, Japan surrendered. World War II was over. The world celebrated. But victory came with scars that would never heal. Millions were dead. Countless survivors carried trauma for the rest of their lives. Yet something remarkable happened next. The generation that fought the war rebuilt the world. They built businesses, started families, created infrastructure, expanded the middle class, put astronauts into space. built roads, schools, and industries. They didn't see themselves as heroes. Most rarely talked about the war at all, but their actions shaped modern civilization. They weren't called the greatest generation because they were flawless. They were called great because when history tested them, they responded with courage, sacrifice, discipline, and resilience. They endured economic collapse, global war, loss, fear, and instead of collapsing under pressure, they became stronger. That's what made them exceptional. Not comfort, adversity. Today, we live in a very different world. Modern life is more convenient than ever. But convenience can sometimes weaken people. That's why the story of World War II still matters. It reminds us what humans are capable of when they embrace responsibility instead of avoiding it. The greatest generation understood something timeless. A meaningful life is not built on comfort alone, it's built on purpose. Most of us will never storm a beach under machine gun fire, and hopefully we never have to. But every generation faces battles of its own. Discipline, temptation, division, addiction, hopelessness. The question is the same. Will we rise to meet the moment? The men and women of World War II proved that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they stop thinking only about themselves. They showed us the power of sacrifice over selfishness, discipline over excuses, unity over division, responsibility over entitlement, courage over comfort. That's why their legacy still inspires millions today. Not because war is glorious, but because character is. One day, future generations will look back at us and ask, what did we stand for? What did we build? What hardships did we overcome? Did we rise to the challenge of our time? The greatest generation left behind more than victory. They left behind an example of resilience, duty, courage, and sacrifice. And maybe the greatest way to honor them is not simply to remember what they did, but to live with the same strength of character ourselves.